Support from viewers like you makes this program possible. Please give to your PBS station.
I owe everything to George Bailey. Help him, dear father.
First time I saw It's Wonderful Life, I had tremendous respect for George Bailey, who was the main character. He did so much good for the community.
Mr. and Mrs. Martini, welcome home.
George was lending money to the community residents to buy houses.
Me, Giuseppe Martini, I own my own house.
And that's exactly the same purpose that when we started the bank, it was our motivation to help a lot of people, a lot of immigrants.
Hey, George, Merry Christmas.
This movie touches me so much. The family, the friends. I always watch it. Every year I watch.
That makes me cry, because that's the part.
I wish this story could end the same way as It's Wonderful Life. But in reality, it is not that simple.
Today, we are announcing the indictment of 19 individuals on charges including mortgage fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy, as well as the indictment of Abacus Federal Savings Bank, a federally chartered bank that has been catering to the Chinese immigrant community since 1984. If we have learned anything from the recent mortgage crisis, it's that at some point, these schemes unravel and taxpayers can be left holding the bag.
The DA made such a big parade, bringing people from Washington, all these tough law enforcement officers, and making such a big announcement that we are part of the cause of financial crisis of 2008. Almost laughable.
Mr. Sung is entitled to his opinions, but in Abacus's loan department, mortgages were based upon false documentation. We have evidence of conspiracy, larceny, and systemic fraud.
控告国宝银行以及2名主管王耀华和谭伟雄在房屋贷款申请中作假。
If that prosecution goes through, that bank is going to go out of business. There's no question about it. They're going to lose their charter, and it's going to enormously impact that community. Too big to fail, turns into small enough to jail, and Abacus is small enough to jail.
When I walk around here, of course, I feel very much at home. Incidentally, this is a very tasty noodle shop if you go in there. I was born in Shanghai in the year 1935. At the age of 16, I immigrated to the United States and went to law school, and I moved to Chinatown. There was not many Chinese lawyers, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of the community, so I did a lot of pro bono work. This building, it was the Chinese national flag. It's a Chinese community center. And in there is the headquarters of Chinese Consolidated Banana Association. I represented the association for years and years and years. This association sponsored a school, and I obtained the permanent charter from Department of Education. And people in the community, older people particularly, remembers me, know what I've done. Back when I was a lawyer, there was no bank that was owned by Chinese and serving the Chinese.
This is Chinatown, New York City. Warm, colorful, cheerful, a wonderful place for sightseeing. This man is on his way to the bank. What is it about the bank that makes our man feel at home? The very design, beautifully bright with the primary Chinese colors, and he sees home in the soft, sweet smile of the teller.
At that time, banks in this community had several $100 million of Chinese deposit. And I went to a bank to try to borrow money, but they do not lend money and deal with the community.
He always told us stories that they were willing to take his deposits, but they weren't willing to give him credit, loans. So that's why he started the bank, because he felt that wasn't fair to the community.
I remember when we were children, my dad was excited about this venture that he was going to start. And he involved us in the decisions of what would be the symbol for the bank. And I remember we would all try to design something.
Abacus, is the Chinese calculator. China regard Abacus as a national treasure. So we say we'll name the bank Abacus. Hello, can you open for me?
We serve people who've never even dealt with the banking system before, and you try to bring them into the banking system. An example of that is the safe deposit boxes.
Have you ever seen so many boxes? There are 8,000 plus boxes in this vault. 8,000. The Chinese people, particularly the immigrants, they rent houses in a very tight quarters. There's no place for them to place their valuables except in a bank vault.
So it starts with the safe deposit boxes. Then they really to put their money into the bank and then let the money grow. And then later on, they will take that money and use it to buy a home.
You get a clear sense of what your mission is at the actual closing. Many of the borrowers bring their whole family with them. And they bring their children, their grandmother, and by the time they walk out, they're all super happy. And you feel good to be a part of that process.
You talked to Heather, right? I don't remember her. Where is she right now?
Do you have the chicken feet in there? No. Oh, okay.
No.
That's always special.
Yeah.
That's the butt. It's a chicken. That's okay. You don't want to eat that.
I like it. She doesn't eat the butt. She can eat the part leading up to the butt.
I never thought my girls would work in Chinatown because we lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. Tom would be commuting every day, like an hour and a half each way. So he didn't see them that much in those days. They had no idea, anything, not a faintest idea about the Chinese community. In fact, Heather still doesn't. She hates the city, She's like me, we both have headaches. And at home, when we don't want them to understand, we speak Chinese.
You always said to me, if you come work for the bank, the benefit will be you have a 9 to 4 job.
9 to 4? He said that 9 to 4?
Yeah, because a long time ago, people could leave at 3 for the bank. He said, you can have children, you can have a family.
You know what he said to me? He said, if you wish to work with me, remember, this is your own choice. And don't think it's going to be easy. You gave me 2 different stories.
People ask me, so why in the world you wanted to get into banking? It's not because I needed a job. I was practicing law. I was busy. But I said to myself, it's time for me to do something. for the society. That started from Ye's time.
Grandfather.
My
grandfather.
grandfather.
My grandfather.
Your father.
He always thought that was the honorable thing to do.
That's not
to do-
unusual.
to-
A lot of people in Chinatown, your generation, they believe that was honorable, to be entrusted.
To be trusted.
Entrusted with the public funds.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have a copy of the payoff letter?
Because I did.
This whole 5-year ordeal began in December of 2009. I had a closing that day involving one of our loan officers, Ken Yu.
Ken Yu worked with us around 4 years. The staff really liked him. He was very popular. He had some charisma, and he was doing a good job.
It was a normal closing. There was the seller's attorney, and it was the buyers. But there was a lot of tension in the closing. They weren't getting along. They were arguing over things.
The attorney asked me a question about additional monies that the borrower said that she was paying. It didn't make sense to me. So I called Ken Yu and I asked him, what are these checks? He just got, oh, blah, 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 hedging and not answering.
Vera was very upset. This girl gave thousands of dollars, I'm told, to this loan officer, and she thought they would be applied towards her closing costs, and they weren't.
It was very shocking. I said, this loan cannot close. That was Friday. Then on Monday, Ken came in, and I fired him that day because he was lying all over the place. Ken Yu stole money, that he was running a money laundering operation on his own, unbeknownst to everybody here, obviously committed fraud. I referred the case to our compliance officer, and then we hired an outside consultant, a former federal prosecutor who was highly experienced in fraud and anti-money laundering investigations. During our investigation, we found 2 other loan officers who were engaged in wrongdoing, nothing at the level of Ken Yu, but we fired them nonetheless. And some other staff also resigned shortly after we notified Fannie Mae.
They actually not only fired the loan officer and canceled the closing, they went straight to the Office of Thrift Management, which was their regulator, and they told them about it. So it was just perfect evidence of a bank finding out something that shouldn't be happening and taking steps to make sure this didn't happen again.
The couple, unfortunately, lost down payment on this house, which was, quite a chunk of money. It was 10% of the house's price. They were very upset.
And at that point, the borrower, she calls me and she's like, there's this money that he's taken from me, so what are you gonna do? And I said to her, I remember I was furious. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Because I'm thinking to myself, maybe she's in cahoots with Ken Yu to defraud the bank. I said, if you have a problem, you should go file a complaint at the police precinct.
A complaint was filed with the local precinct. The initial DA's office investigation was focused solely on the employee who had been accused of a theft.
The DA's office started asking us questions. Everybody who asked us for something, we gave them. We thought we actually went beyond what we were supposed to do. My compliance officer actually put together binders for her staff. And so basically, the beginning of the case was handed to her team in binder form.
At first you think that they're here to figure out what's going on for us because they're law enforcement. I don't know where and at what point we transitioned to...
In their mind, yeah.
In their mind, and then us realizing, wait a minute, maybe we're the target.
We spent a lot of time investigating and ended up absolutely convinced that the loan department was corrupt pretty much through and through. Mr. Wong ran the loan department, and widespread fraud was occurring in front of him every day.
In July 2011, 2 of the policemen went to my house and asked me to go to the district attorney office to have an interview. But I refused.
The office was convinced that the knowledge of that corruption went up to high enough people in the bank that the bank was legally responsible for it.
Let me assure you that we do not take lightly the charges that we announced today. In fact, the last time this office filed an indictment against a bank was BCCI in 1991. Now, these defendants the bank and former employees and managers from its loan department are charged with engaging in a systematic scheme to falsify and fabricate loan applications to the Federal National Mortgage Association, commonly known as Fannie Mae.
When the actual indictment occurred, I think the greatest fear was that it would directly involve Jill. And that was something that was incomprehensible to us, just knowing how we were raised, that she could ever be guilty of something like that.
I mean, I think they definitely were trying to get me, yeah, because I'm the CEO and president. But they did not charge me individually because they did not have any evidence to support that I was involved in the wrongdoing.
We felt that the provable evidence stopped at a certain level, but that the individuals who were charged were high enough in the corporation to charge the corporation.
I was at the district attorney's office as a prosecutor for 7 years. The very division that was bringing this prosecution against the family bank.
And when I found out what they were doing, I had to go to my bureau chief to let him know that, you know, this was going on. There's a potential conflict here. And it made me so angry that that very same office where I had served and been trained could do that. To know that they were doing this against my family, who is me, that's where I come from. And then to know that my reputation in the office was one of utmost integrity. It just made no sense.
孙启成表示，国宝银行非常配合曼哈顿检察官的调查，递交了60多万张纸的文件。
他现在要我们认罪呢，这个事情呢，是我们跟这个不能接受他的这个判断。
What was especially interesting was the way the DA pursued the public relations aspect of this prosecution. Reporters in this town were treated to this extraordinary photo opportunity, this almost Stalinist-looking chain gang.
I'm a former prosecutor. I'm not soft on crime. I've never seen a spectacle like this. These people were humiliated intentionally for no good reason.
It is not the district attorney's office's decision whether or not to put people in handcuffs, but people who are brought into court who have been charged with crimes are put into handcuffs. That's a decision that's made by the court officers. I won't go into it more than that because, you know, it's not something I'm involved with.
Court officers don't come outside of the courtroom. They were led down the hallway by district attorney investigators.
I got off the elevator and I saw what was happening. I had never seen that in my entire time at the DA's office. I mean, this was like the case of the century.
He never would have done that with a black group of employees. You know, I mean, everyone would see that for what it was. And they actually staged it so much so that 3 of the people that were in that chain had already been arraigned, had already posted bond, and were out awaiting trial.
The DA had added charges to Mr. Wong's indictment. Usually, you don't even have to go through the process again. They just add the charges, you get arraigned again, the bail is transferred, and that's that. Instead, they had me turn him in, and next thing you know, I see him chained to 15 other people being herded like cattle down the hallways of 100 Center Street. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'd never seen that happen before.
I'm sure there are security issues behind the decision, but those decisions can also have implications and create feelings that don't reflect the view of the office or my view, and to the degree that happened here, I think it was very unfortunate, but it happened.
And it's a humiliation. It's a humiliation for me.
And that's where I saw incompetence combined with arrogance. My deputy bureau chief, he's always so
inspirational, and he would always refer to the inscriptions outside 100 Center Street about having faith in justice. But I don't believe that anymore. I decided to leave the DA's office.
It really angered the Chinese community, but so what? They're not going to decide an election for Vance.
That's it.
You've done that many times?
My whole life. This is the association where my great-grandfather was, my grandfather, my dad. Back in the days with the Exclusion Act, people do not have rights. This is where they would all come. Family associations like this one are the only place where they felt welcome. Like Mr. Song, what drives me is that sense of community. Hey, 幾號呀？好嘅，冇見好叫。學生咗咪訓練。係咪嚟咗？又肥咗又靚多咗。係啊，咁客氣。點啊？去邊啊？唔識。行街。誒，早晨，點啊？去邊啊？ This case is about an attack on our community. We're easy prey. I think that's what's going on. People have reason to be fearful of authority or what can happen to them. You know, the retribution, the years of oppression that happened from the street vendors, from the small businesses, from people just writing tickets because they can.
佢嘅和少少嘅 face 喺度受成一天滿落去上嗰度。咪啦，我叫佢搖到啊搖呀，我到嚟做得個造字，人哋都唔係行先，得個造字嘅。咁佢抄嚟講，咁樣就係。佢話我個 face 咯。就話你嗰個位。係嗰個位啦。咁你嗰個警車泊咗喺嗰度 sidewalk 就冇事。佢冇事。你嗰一寸。咁啊，我哋有事，我哋有，佢哋大細，我哋係咁樣，我。少啲嘅 scale 又阻住。要打咗人哋個房，打咗佢背脊，佢翻嚟，佢告你翻嚟咯。你打咗人哋嘅嘢嘅喎，嗰個人咧消費者點兜條路啊？你叫佢。
It's more than just Abacus Savings Bank being clear. It's about exonerating our entire community, no matter what we do. Be it the little guy selling vegetables or a bank that's doing business. I told Mr. Song, I'm glad they pick on you because you're a fighter.
Cyrus Vance just felt this is easier to attack, especially it's a family bank. But he doesn't realize Tom is not easy to be pushed around. And my girls, they're tough, smart, capable women, so courageous.
Although this is David versus Goliath, David, being Abacus Federal Savings Bank, has a slingshot. And that is, you know, their whole family of lawyers.
I was going to be able to fight this. They're almost gleeful. They're like, we're going to have our day in court now. We're actually going to be able to show that they were wrong.
They made a decision that they were not going to plead guilty to something that they didn't feel the bank was guilty of. That is a courageous choice, and it's an expensive choice. The DA's office has hundreds of lawyers and took 5 years to do their grand jury investigations, and it is a daunting task to fight the government.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is a simple case about a bank that was converted into a criminal conspiracy fueled by greed. Defendant Abacus Federal Savings Bank engaged in an ongoing mortgage fraud conspiracy. They routinely falsified and faked mortgage documents and then deceived the Federal National Mortgage Association, commonly known as Fannie Mae. They took Fannie Mae's money for loans riddled with lies, all the while promising that the loans contained truthful and verified information. The defendants did this over and over and over again. And between 2005 and 2010, the bank earned millions of dollars servicing and selling fraudulent loans to Fannie Mae. The defendants conspired to steal money from Fannie Mae and did, in fact, steal money from Fannie Mae.
Historians tell us that Abraham Lincoln loved riddles, and one of his favorites went like this. If you call a tail a leg, how many legs does a dog have? And the answer is 4, because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. Calling Fannie Mae a victim of grand larceny and fraud is like calling a dog's tail a leg. We have no loss. We have no harm. We have no larceny. We have no fraud.
Hello?
Heather, you're on speaker.
Okay. So how did everything go today?
It was a very long day.
We're
exhausted. Long day.
I'm so tired.
Don't get me wrong. I think the lawyer all did a very, very good
How about-
job. But the feeling, the emotion was a little bit lacking.
He
A good, strong
touch the emotion.
presentation of your case
agree with
requires
you. Of course,
emotion.
there were so many other things that could have been said or should have been
I
said. You gotta let your attorney, at this point, who's been living with this case and feels very strongly about it, you gotta let him.
I think he was.
Leave him be. Let him do it.
He spent the most time talking about how we stopped that closing. And he showed you what steps we took. After that, if the jury is not has to be convinced by document evidence.
I agree with you. The facts are brought out. The laws are brought out.
He said your face and you said that this 30-year business.
No, it's not finished. That's
I
not
would-
point. Finish it. You keep on interrupting.
Now, let him express his feelings.
Because
He
you're
has
not-
to.
we let him express his feelings.
Yeah, but then you consider.
We're allowed to express our feeling too.
That's why
Yeah, but you don't have to be jumping around.
I haven't been jumping around. I haven't been talking actually.
Is
Talking back
appeals
to
to
me.
the human.
I really.
I gotta do work. I had to sign off on loans. That loan has been sitting on my desk for 3 days
come
now.
on, do it.
I want to give
Speaking
the
of
loan out to
which-
people.
You know what? Don't get so excited.
I'm not. I'm just saying I gotta get things done.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Heather, I'm hanging up on you now, okay? Rocket, let's go.
Okay,
Rock it
Jill,
up.
we'll leave you be.
Get out, get out, get out.
We'll leave you be.
You're gonna I have to
We have to work
I have
now.
work. Let's go.
So there were 180 or so counts in this trial. And let's also remember that there were, I think, 10 guilty pleas here.
The DA, his case was built basically on the fact that he arrested all these very low-level loan officers.
They started going to people's houses, many people at 6 in the morning, knocking on their door and demanding, not forcing, but demanding that people come down to the district attorney's office and speak to them. And they got a lot of statements from a lot of people using that tactic.
We're talking about Chinese people, many of whom have come from a police state. And in China, people are terrified of that, the knock on the door.
Good morning, Mr. Yu.
Good morning.
When the court officer swore you in, he asked you your name. You said Chi Bin Yu. Is there another name that you go by?
Can you?
Here's this gentleman, Ken Yu, who was how the bank found out about this misconduct in the first place. The guy that the bank fired, not only was he falsifying documents in order to put through loans, he was stealing money from customers. That guy ends up being the DA's office star witness.
Mr. Yu, I'd like to direct your attention to the Ariel Chi case. Ms. Chi was the borrower that you stole money from, right?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that you asked Ms. Chi for a cash tip as well?
No, I never asked her for a cash tip. I don't remember that part.
Mr. Yu, you had a telephone conversation with Ariel Chi, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And at the time, you didn't know that Ms. Chi was actually tape recording that conversation with the assistance of the district attorney's office, correct?
Yes, sir.
The DA's office was trying to get him to implicate the bank. This recording was brought into trial through our attorneys on cross-examination of Ken Yu.
Let's just get right into it.
You owe me after closing, then I'm supposed to go and give you cash, right?
Hey, to make things, I mean, it's legal, you're not supposed to do that, but hey, it's after the closing.
Yeah, I mean, everything else is legally not right, so, you know, I think that's the little one.
It's just unwritten rule that it's happening to every case that I see. You know, at the end, you show some appreciation.
Does this refresh your recollection that you did ask her for a tip?
Yeah.
I noticed that he couldn't look at me.
That's very telling.
Yeah, he couldn't look at me, but I was like, I'm gonna look at you. I was like, I'm burn you with my eyes.
I was looking
eyeballs.
at him intently as well too. I dare you to say what you want to say.
He got on the stand and perjured himself over and over and over again in ways that a defense lawyer just doesn't get in a career more than once or twice. The jury laughed at him multiple times.
Abacus, you told me that Abacus knew, right?
But we don't say it to the bank. It's just the individuals, the people who work for the bank. I'm an employee of the bank, and so is the other underwriter.
So then, okay, but like Abacus, like the bank, they know that everybody's thing is made up, right?
I will say that.
Now, you had a long pause there, didn't you, Mr. Yu?
I was driving.
So that long pause is because you were driving? You were distracted? That's your testimony?
I cannot recall, but I was definitely driving.
You'll say that if you get in trouble. Is that what you meant there?
I say that because...
That's a very... Mr. Yu, I'm asking you. It's a strange way to answer that question. And I'm asking you what you meant by...
I will say that.
I would say that. I believe that.
Well, the jury can decide what your tone suggests.
It became quite clear that he had no trouble lying. If that's how he's comfortable acting, I would have thought that he would be comfortable saying much more to try to directly link Mr. Tam and Mr. Wong and Jill Sung with what had happened. But even he didn't do that.
But you also had to not let go of the fact that he didn't get this way overnight. He had years of this type of behavior that was just overlooked on numerous occasions.
What role did the bank's management play in what had happened? How much they actually were not aware of what was happening versus turning a blind eye because things were going well and the results were good.
Ken Yu was clearly a bad egg. By using Ken Yu, which is the worst of the worst, the DA's office is saying, this is the face of the institution. And the jurors would believe that and find that credible. If the bank was in such cahoots with this person, then why would we fire him? We would want to save him.
What the DA accused Abacus Bank of was ridiculous and really nothing, considering what the big banks were doing. All the too big to fail banks, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, and Citicorp, have admitted to massive crimes, and they've been accused of even worse.
Virtually every major financial company and big bank in this country, and many of the foreign banks as well, were engaged in a far-ranging fraud scheme whereby they were issuing huge numbers of home loans, particularly to middle and low-income borrowers, and then they were repackaging those loans and selling them to investors, but disguising them as high-rated securities. Those were extremely dangerous, toxic loans that were likely to blow up and did blow up in huge numbers after 2008.
But there was this notion that we couldn't bring criminal action against them because the collateral consequences of an institution that was so large, so internationally connected, that indicting them or bringing criminal charges against them could wreck the entire financial system.
So you have these enormous offenders, and they commit crimes. We'll just take money. They'll cut a check and make it all go away.
I think every American was upset at the crisis that we went through. There was behavior that was less than ethical, and I think Americans were upset that the security against which loans were made were often fictitious. And in Abacus, there was some truth to that too. It's clearly not a big bank. And clearly it was not representative of the entire financial community. But I think the principle was the same.
It shows, I think, very graphically this difference in how we deal with a certain kind of offender versus everybody else.
Mr. Sung was not offered the same deal. He wasn't offered a chance to just pay a fine. He wasn't offered a chance to plead guilty to some minor thing. He wasn't offered the chance even of deferred prosecution. He didn't get any of that offered to him.
The DA told us, you had to accept a plea of guilty for felony plus a fine. Now, what is our choice?
They wanted a conviction, and Vance was going to go after him.
I think if you were going to pick a bank to pick on, a family-owned company wedged between a couple of noodle shops in Chinatown is about as easy a target as you could possibly pick.
I think the characterizations that this was somehow a cultural bias on the office's part, entirely misplaced and entirely wrong. We devote an enormous amount of effort into protecting immigrant communities, and I felt that our handling of the bank was consistent with how we would have handled the bank if we were investigating a bank that serviced the South American community or the Indian community. There was nothing different that we did or purposefully designed to treat this bank differently.
It was important for prosecution to show how exactly loan managers knew what was happening. I think the most compelling piece of evidence they had was this seating chart of the Abacus loan department. The loan officers who had been indicted were scattered around the floor, and somewhere in the middle was the loan office manager.
This was all happening around Mr. Tam's desk. How would he not be aware of this type of behavior when this was going on a routine daily basis?
It's not so simplistic as they would like you to believe as a simple drawing as to where someone sat. But on top of that, they brought Ken Yu, who was a consummate liar, and he speaks a different language than Mr. Tam. He conducts business outside of the bank. Actually, at one point, they cross-examined Ken, because Ken said, oh, the guy gave me cash, and I was counting from my table. When the borrower came in to testify, the borrower said, no, I met him in the lobby of the bank.
We were able to show that the loan officers were taking steps to hide their misconduct from the underwriters and the more senior levels of the bank. They would stop talking when an underwriter would come to the floor. They would forge signatures to make sure the signatures would match up. When the underwriter looked at the file, everything would look normal.
If the borrower tells me that he works at a local deli, and the income on his tax return is $300 a week, that's not enough to get a mortgage loan from us. But instead of turning him down, what I would do is ask, is there an employer that can verify a higher income?
And when you would record that information, did you believe it to be truthful?
Of course not.
And who were you trained by?
That would be Mr. Tam and Mr. Wong.
It was absurd. You had loan originators that were going to make commissions by getting these loans through. And then you had people like Mr. Wong who had no incentive whatsoever financially to do this. So they did everything they could to hide their crimes from Mr. Wong because they knew he wasn't involved and that he would deny loans, which he did many times. He would deny people where the income couldn't be verified or where it seemed like the income was out of line. There was one denial he did where there were fraudulent documents that he uncovered. And his denial of loans cost the originator his commission.
當然咧，見到啲舊同事即係講大話㗎啦，你個心當然覺得一個好唔開心嘅事嘅嘢啦。不過你係一個被告坐喺度，你都冇辦法，你咪只係睇住佢咯，冇辦法。
I think the people who went to the bank and got the loan didn't fully understand perhaps that what they were doing was lying. But I think that ultimately the unintended losers here were the borrowers in the community.
We were actually contributing to the revival of the community. It is absolutely mind-boggling for him to say that.
When the indictment came down, Sung saw it as an existential threat to his bank, and rightly so, because so many institutions failed just from having that indictment.
We already went through a crisis in 2003 that almost closed down the bank.
Still no sign of a former Chinatown bank manager charged with embezzling more than $1 million. The FBI is looking for Carol Lim, who ran the Canal Street branch of Abacus Federal Savings. Word of the alleged scam sent off panic waves among bank customers
So in 2003, I happened to be doing a story in Chinatown. My photographer at the time said to me, something going on up the block.
Back it up! Back it up! Chaos in Chinatown as thousands of investors make a run on Abacus Federal Savings Bank, demanding their money after hearing that a former bank manager was being investigated for embezzling $1 million. When the rumor spread in the Asian community, the run for the dough was on.
我相信他们有那一些钱，但是对目前这些情况，这么多人在这里排队，我不相信他们有很多的钱应付得来。
Take a walk. Go elsewhere. Do something else today. Cops struggled to control the crowd, one even bitten by an elderly woman demanding her money. Many struggled to avoid being crushed in the crowd.
In that short period of time, people withdrew something like $44 million, putting us in a liquidity crisis. Associated Press report that we have not seen this type of run since the 30s, since the Depression.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
You have to understand something about Thomas Sung. To me, he's like Jimmy Stewart out of It's a Wonderful Life. He's the small town banker, but the town is Chinatown.
I went to the police department, asked them, gave me a bullhorn. I went on the line, and I said to them, I'm here.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others.
And I actually went out and shook hands with them. Feel my warm hand. I'm here. I'm the real person. After I did that, the run subsided.
Relative calm in Chinatown in sharp contrast to Tuesday's mad rush on the Abacus Federal Savings Bank. The CEO of the bank assuring investors.
They knew that everything was okay. The people came back. They came in, deposited money. They thanked us. If I did not have that rapport with the people, then I would have been much more worried that the DA indicted the bank. But if verdict is guilty, there is the possibility that Abacus will not survive.
I never supported him with a bank. I have to be honest. I told my husband, I said, banking is not good. I felt it's a troubled business. There are too many banks, not everyone is successful, and not everyone will really appreciate what happens, if something wrong with the bank.
When you have a false document, you enhances the ability of Fannie Mae to ask you to take back the loan.
I really felt my girls should go to do something else that they like to do. I didn't want them to work at the bank, but they went in, because they want to help their father. They're fiercely loyal to Tom.
You agree that income and assets is a material fact that has to be accurately represented.
So I had never until now found a motivation really to come work for the bank. And this year when the trial started, I was having nightmares myself. I mean, Vera and I were sharing a room back at my parents' house in Connecticut, and we were both waking each other up. And I realized, I was like, I can't go on in my own career right now anymore. As like, I have to help my family now.
Because I think the law the document represents a material fact.
I'm saying if it is truly material, listen to me. If it is truly material, the loan will go in default.
Differentiation may fall. I get really frustrated sometimes. This is probably a factor of being the youngest, but sometimes I just, whatever I say, it's just not heard.
Papa,
You are not convincing.
If that's the form that you choose to use,
tongue-in-cheek.
Papa,
She said no
if
harm, no foul.
If that's the form,
I never said that.
Hold on, I have a question, Papa.
I didn't say that.
If that's the form that you choose to use to represent, if that is the
form,
form,
that's not true. I just told you there is harm.
It's very difficult.
Okay, nothing more for me to say.
This is my office, sorry. As you can see, my desk is now piled extremely high. But I think it's always been a mess. That's just my personality. My father has always said, as an attorney, you should be neat and organized. Maybe I'm just not cut out to be an attorney. Is there anything, Tracy, on your desk, anything urgent that I need to get done before the weekend? We haven't been having many closings because of the effect of the trial. I've been waking up at 5 in the morning, getting work done early in the morning, banging out all these emails and answering emails, and then go to court, and then just come back to the office. Actually try to get more work done during lunch, and then we would run back to court.
Did you ever tell the person that you spoke to at Abacus Bank that you were a manager at Becky's Nail Spa?
我不是经理，那人告诉我你的收入非常低，所以你最好。I was not a manager. The person told me that my income was very low, so it's better I have to be a manager, otherwise I can't get a loan.
The prosecution over and over tried to suggest that the borrowers were innocent, that it was the loan officers who were inducing the borrowers to falsify documents to qualify their loans.
On this loan file, why does it say you're a manager?
I don't know.
Did you tell anyone that you were a manager?
Nope.
But we were able to show with witness after witness that it was not just the loan officers. Borrowers were trying to fool the bank in order to put through loans.
Mr. Lin, you had your employer sign the verification of employment form for the loan file, is that correct?
Yes.
And he signed as the co-owner of the China Sun. Did anybody co-own the restaurant with Mr. Pan?
I don't really know.
You don't know if Shu Kin Lin was also a co-owner of the China Sun restaurant?
I only met this person a few times. I don't know if this person is a co-owner of the restaurant or not.
Shu Kin Lin, you only met a few times and you don't know if she's a co-owner?
They didn't tell me. I didn't ask.
Okay, Shu Kin Lin, spelled S-H-U-Q-I-N-L-I-N. You don't know who that is?
I know who that is.
You do know who that is. So who is that?
You can say she's like a sister.
Is she like a sister or is she your sister?
She's my sister.
There was a string of witnesses who were just abject liars, to the point where it became a concern of ours that the jury is going to think that everyone that the bank deals with, former employees and customers, are just full of shit.
So the trial's been going on for the 9th week now, right?
Is it 9?
Day 52.
Yeah.
It's around day 52. I've been keeping track of the number of days since the jury was, yes, since January 12th.
I just cannot believe how this thing could be dragged out so long. The weeks in trial and the expenses involved, the millions of dollars that's spent to defend yourself. And witness after witness, of course they would know they are lying. So you bring these people out day after day for 9 weeks. And what is the effect on the community? People get the wrong impression that Chinese are not law-abiding. That's
Well,
just too bad.
We can hopefully win this case and make a statement.
Well, even if you win the case, the damage,
well, to us,
the strain on the community is done.
Chinese immigrants come from a culture in which so many financial transactions are based on trust, and trust that's not underwritten by a piece of paper, on trust that's an intimate understanding, between members of a community or between family members. I don't think any of the borrowers think that they are really committing a crime, even if some of these loan documents are falsified.
One particular individual had been approved for an $800,000 mortgage loan, but on their tax return, they were earning only $24,000 a year. I think this was as a couple. There were a lot of gasps across the jury panel. How does this even happen? I know I would have a very difficult time going into a bank and getting approval, for even a couple $100,000 for a loan.
Tax evasion, I think, lurks in the background of this case. Because they work primarily in a cash economy, a lot of the borrowers had money that they did not report to the IRS. Only when they're purchasing a house, did it become necessary for them to prove how much money they had? But then they were trapped in this position of not having the paper trail.
Maybe folks in that community don't pay 100% of their taxes. These are issues that if they have a problem with with any immigrant community that operates in cash, okay, that they have the wherewithal to do something about that. The IRS does too. Abacus isn't the FBI. There's no bank regulations that require the bank to basically serve as a police force against its own customers.
There'd be chaos if your bank basically was the IRS. No one would want to bank with any bank.
You can say that our responsibility was to provide credit to the community, not to be a policeman.
And I remember Mr. Sung said this to me with regard to a restaurant. He said a guy comes to him to modernize his restaurant. And he said, I don't even need to ask him his income because I eat at that restaurant and I see how full it is. So, when he comes in and asks me for a loan, I'm ready to give him the money. That's the kind of thing a community bank can do. And in the Chinese community, that's what they were doing. They knew their community, they were making these loans.
The prosecution had insisted since the beginning of the trial that many of the documents that were part of the mortgage package were fraudulent, and that included, in many cases, gift letters written by relatives or friends.
There was knowledge throughout the loan department that what was being put forward as unencumbered gifts were in fact loans, and the source of those loans, money that came from who knows where.
In Chinese culture, the line between a gift and a loan is very blurry, to the extent where there isn't even really a distinction when it's coming from your parents or your relatives.
This is what immigrants have always done. Jewish families did it, Irish families did it, Italian families did it, Chinese families do it.
If I receive, $50,000 from my mother, there isn't a paper document that says I must return that sum. But, if I end up caring for her in her old age, that's a form of payment. And I remember sitting in the courtroom hearing how perplexed they were when they were answering this question, when, repeatedly they were being badgered, is this a gift or is this a loan? Can you clarify? They said, well, if I can pay it back, I will, but, if I can't, we're a family.
So gift letters actually had to be from a relative or spouse. But it came to surface that these loan officers sometimes were listed as the gift donors.
Mr. Yu, at the top of this gift letter certification, it reads that you are making a gift of $9,000 to your cousin, Chi Zhen Chen. Is Chi Zhen Chen your cousin?
No.
Did you make a gift of $9,000 to Chi Zhen Chen?
He gave me $9,000 in cash, and we went downstairs and got the certified bank check in his name.
Tell us how it came to be that Chi Zhen Chen gave you $9,000 and then you gave him a check.
This particular customer did not have any credit scores.
Can you tell us from this document who approved this loan?
That would be Ms. Vera Song.
If Ken Yu is signing a gift letter, that would be disturbing. That's not what happened.
The Chinese name Kim is not known, but people just called him Ken. Ken Yu clearly knew that and purposely put his Chinese name on that check for that reason, to obfuscate that it was him who had given, quote, gift to the borrower.
Mr. Yu, what is the commitment letter?
That the bank agrees to give this borrower a loan if all the conditions were met.
Right. And gift letters, for example, have to be in the file before you close, but not before the commitment letter goes out. Isn't that right?
You're right, sir.
So the verification of employment that you helped fake, the gift letters that you helped fake, were done after Vera Sung approved this loan on behalf of the board of directors. Isn't that right?
In this case, yes.
It's trying for us because it's our father's legacy.
Exactly.
And he's passed that legacy on to us. And Vera always, when she was born, she wants to be very mean to me. She'll point out, it happened under your watch, right? So she can be very mean to me. She's like, it happened under you.
I'm such a mean older sister.
So, so that I can sit there and be like, wow, I really failed.
So much time has gone by.
Our father was 75 and now he's 80.
People don't understand there's some long-term effects from going through such a traumatic experience.
This bank will surely continue to seek vindication, not simply for the ultimate acquittal of the bank itself, but for the larger Chinese immigrant community that it has served for 31 years. The raw display of power by the DA will always remind this and other minority communities that our human rights can easily be trampled upon. It's a little bit counterintuitive the way you write it. You want to tell people that you cannot allow something bad to go on.
That's what I told them.
And so you're saying human rights can easily be trampled upon, and I don't read it. I don't want people to think you're saying that it can be. In other words, it should be a normative sentence. It should not be trampled upon.
The cost has been great, but it's very different per each member of the family because we all handle stress in a very different way.
See, Chantrell, this is all in here, but he changed my words again, and then he didn't put it in properly in here.
A little bit dry.
Because that's the chicken. No mayo, that's why, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's cheese.
Mm-hmm.
My father especially is able to handle stress in an incredible way.
If you don't like your sandwich, are you okay?
Fine.
You said it's dry.
Mm-hmm.
As he's gotten older, I think he feels that he's done what he's wanted to do. He's a little more philosophical, and to know that he's done the best that he can do is good for him.
If it's too much chicken, you don't have to eat all of it.
No.
He says
the avocado?
He complained. He said it's dry.
They didn't put mayonnaise.
They did put, yeah, but they put avocado.
avocado?
They put avocado.
Mm-hmm.
But he says it's dry. And he said it's dry, but I'm easy.
This is how he is. He's very calm, and I'm like a jumping beans. I'm always running around, That's how I am, and drives me nuts.
My mother, I think, probably feels things the strongest. She's a very emotional person, and I think defines herself to a large degree by the perceptions that others have. So it hurts her.
I felt I lost my face. Chinese always want to save their face. I was embarrassed to even see my friends because nobody know. I really don't know too much about the banking and how I'm gonna explain everything. All I can say is we did not do it. Yesterday was horrible, so torturous, I just couldn't stand people thinking of my children that bad, The prosecutor is saying that Jill lied, so that really bothered me. I felt like screaming. Of course, Vera always tell me, don't talk, don't move. So I had to sit there and just suppress myself, That's why I couldn't even eat lunch yesterday. I had a stomach ache.
Ms. Roma, is the Federal National Mortgage Association, otherwise known as Fannie Mae,
in the business to make money.
Fannie Mae is in the business of providing home ownership. And as a result of that, Fannie Mae does make money, yes.
This whole case ultimately came down to Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was the alleged victim in the case.
The prosecution's premise was that the 30 loans that were in the indictment that we had sold to Fannie Mae were not good because the documentation themselves were not what they were supposed to be.
The bank can do whatever it wants. The bank could keep those loans, it could service those loans, and care not a whit about the documentation. That was the bank's choice. Keep them or sell them. It chose to sell them. In selling the loans to Fannie Mae, they simply passed the risk off to unknowing purchasers.
Ms. Roma, Fannie Mae doesn't want to lose money, does it?
Absolutely not. And it doesn't want our lenders to lose money either.
And you are familiar with the default rate of Abacus loans during the indictment period, correct?
Yes, I am.
During the 5-year period of the alleged fraud, Abacus sold a little over 3,000 mortgages to Fannie Mae. The number of defaults of those 3,000 totaled 9. 9. Would you say that that was a low default rate?
The default rate is low.
Would you say it's microscopically low?
Objection to the characterization.
Sustained as to the word microscopic.
Abacus Federal Savings Bank had one of the nation's lowest default rates, not the highest, one of the lowest.
But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, was there, falsified information, and was it sold? And it was.
These loans had not lost any money. They're performing. It was clear financially who was benefiting was Fannie Mae from that transaction. People got their loans, they got their houses. It was almost ridiculous. It was almost literally ridiculous.
Larceny is about stealing. To bring larceny charges against the bank when the supposed victim actually made hundreds of millions of dollars, it's outrageous.
My view is if I take $5 out of your wallet, I've taken your money. If I give that back to you, or if you don't at the very end actually have any loss because the money gets back to you, that's still, in our view, a larceny.
If I sold Fannie Mae a loan for $5, not only did they get their $5 back on time as what they thought they were going to get it, they also got $3 to $4, $5 back in interest, which makes it $10. So tell me how that is considered larceny.
There are two types of mortgage fraud that generally occur. We call them fraud for profit and fraud for home. There are a certain number of people who commit the crime of mortgage fraud because they lie on their application to get a loan for the home that they want to live in. Is it technically a crime? Absolutely. Is it a crime that is worth the resources of a state or federal government? Absolutely not. These are low default rates on these types of loans. The losses are relatively minor. The other types of fraud where there really was never any intention to pay the mortgage. It was just about reaping profit as quickly as possible. Or fraud that went into these complex securities that were built, when the knowledge that there was little to no chance that these loans are going to get repaid, that's where the resources need to go. And throwing your hands up in the air and suggesting that, well, gee, anytime a crime is committed, we put all of our resources in to prove it, is just not true. I mean, today, walking over to my office, the light was red. And I confess, I walked across the street against a red light. I am absolutely guilty of jaywalking, and I could have gotten a ticket. Did I get one? No. It would have been a complete waste of the NYPD's resources to issue me a ticket and divert them of the real crime that's going on in the city. And that's where it all comes back into this idea of discretion. And regulators and prosecutors have to act with the necessary discretion of when to bring charges and when not to bring charges.
Neil is certainly entitled to his opinion. I disagree with the characterization that this was jaywalking. Because I think it was systemic and over a long term, and ultimately the risk was passed without notice to third parties.
There should probably be regulatory punishment for that type of behavior without a question. But who got hurt? Who lost money Who are the taxpayers that got hurt? Who are the investors that got hurt? Who are the individuals that lost their homes? Who are the people that got tricked into mortgages they couldn't afford and got thrown out on the street? Who lost their life savings? What financial system collapsed? What GDP took a hit because of the actions that Abacus did? And as far as I can tell, none.
Frankly, if every bank had underwritten as well as Abacus during the indictment period, we wouldn't have had a financial crisis.
We really need to talk about one issue right now, which is whether or not we should have Jill testify.
It's really difficult. Like, we keep switching back and forth. As of yesterday, Rusty believed that she should testify. Kevin took a different position. He was a little bit more hesitant. Right. And Papa feels so far that Jill should testify.
Actually, Rusty and Papa have the same opinion.
No. Yeah, but I don't want to, pressure her to testify. But Rusty's view was that the jury always wondering why, if you are so innocent, why would you not testify?
Right. And he thinks that a jury might not feel much towards a corporate institution. Whereas if you put a personal face to it, such as Jill, they'll begin to see and feel and realize that the consequences of conviction are serious.
However, other people believe that if they haven't made their case, then you leave it at that. Also, nothing has been truly said of Jill to implicate her in anything.
Right. I feel like I have yet to hear a reason to put Jill on. In fact, if you don't put her on, it's not because you're trying to hide anything, but because there's
nothing to defend.
Nothing to defend.
Excuse me, am I in the voice of
Yes,
what?
yes, the mother is speaking.
Well, Jill has no opinion of her own.
That's a very good question. She's not here right now.
She didn't even want to have this conversation.
The feeling that we got from her was that if she needs to testify, she will, but she would feel terrible if she didn't testify well, and that would result in a negative outcome.
Yeah, and she would blame herself. I just wanted to, Papa, because I know you feel strongly about Jill testifying, and I had felt the same way.
I actually am not.
You're not
no longer strongly insisting on.
Okay.
I
have changed your mind.
Yeah.
So, how would we feel if Jill didn't take the stand and we did not win the case? Would we have regrets?
I can't answer that. I have given the matter a careful and thorough analysis. If the outcome is not for me, I do not and should not feel regretful.
They have said it's their theory that these kinds of documents are so obviously false that Mr. Tam and Mr. Wong and the banks on their underwriters should have caught that. And the fact that they didn't catch them suggested that they were involved in the fraud. That's what they're telling you, ladies and gentlemen. But here's the problem. Fannie Mae, the best underwriters in the country, all they do all day, every day, is look at loan files from all over the country. They are the gold standard, and they didn't see anything wrong with these documents. So if the best there is doesn't see anything wrong, how can that be criminal? It's not. And here I'm going to show you again Fannie Mae's email from 2012, because it sheds some light on this very issue. We recognize that you have very unique needs that are closely linked to the borrowers you serve. While doing anything customized in this environment is very difficult, the team is committed to doing whatever we can to develop solutions that meet the needs of your culturally unique clientele. Ladies and gentlemen, Fannie Mae itself is conceding here that this is Chinatown. It's 1,000 small businesses, first generation, special needs, and the bank serves that community. Does that pose challenges to the bank? Absolutely. It would be a lot easier to deal with a bunch of investment bankers who have W-2s and tax returns all the time. That would be easier. But the bank has chosen to serve this community, challenges and all.
Abacus's own narrative that they are trying to give you is that they are trying to assist hardworking first-generation immigrants live the American dream as a community service. That's admirable. And it's great. And Abacus Federal Savings Bank is free to do that and then hold the risk on their own books. What they are not free to do is take risks with other people's money and not tell them. They cannot take those risks and pass it off to somebody else without telling the truth.
Thank you. And then she tried to say that these loans seem to be representative of our entire loan portfolio, which is not true.
She literally rolled her eyes at your mission and building this bank for the community, to serve the community, and tell these people to serve the American dream. She just cast it aside.
Isn't it fortunate at my age I could hardly hear everything that's said in the court?
That's a blessing.
That's a blessing.
Did you observe in the beginning that the Honorable Cy Vance himself attended the beginning part?
I did not see it.
I have seen him on TV.
Yes.
And he's much smaller in person.
Yeah.
As a family, we've always been very close, but we've unified even more during this time, which is great. Why are you laughing?
She was just in tears, and now she's bursting out laughing.
You know, the judge sounds like a godfather.
No, he said he has to save his voice for the jury charge, because that's going to be a few hours, probably.
Are you not eating any rice? Are you on the diet?
No.
The defendants are each charged with 20 counts of grand larceny in the second degree, 1 count of grand larceny in the first degree, 48 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree, 9 counts of residential mortgage fraud in the second degree, 1 count of residential mortgage fraud in the first degree, and 1 count of conspiracy in the fourth degree. Jurors, your responsibility in this case is extremely important. However, it is limited to this case. You have not been asked to make some general assessment of corporate governance in America or whether banks are good or not. You are not here to send a message to anyone. You are here to determine whether the people have proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendants here on trial are guilty of one or more of the crimes charged in this case.
If they were going to vindicate all of us, we would hope that it happened quickly. You know what I mean? They'd be like, oh, we heard this evidence, it's not worth it. Just vindicate everybody.
This is a really nerve-wracking time. Not knowing what the jury is going to decide and wondering how come they didn't come back already.
At this point, now, I think it's really bothering me. It's like, why can't they see what seemed so apparent in the trial? I hate waiting in court. It's boring and annoying. I'd rather be doing work. But our lawyers want us to be here in court. In case the jury have a question, they want the jury to see we're still here and we can help pick out the documents. So I'll have to bring a lot of work, a picnic basket of work.
Day after day, the jury did not come back. And in fact, the jury was asking for various documents, some, unfavorable for the prosecution, some unfavorable for the defense.
The first note came back and they said they wanted the list of the loans that the DA's office was claiming were bad. And then they wanted all the loan files for those loans. And then they wanted all the denial files.
It got to the point when we were actually trying to analyze the handwriting on the notes.
We all know we didn't do anything. It's
I mean, it's impossible that we're found guilty on all counts. This is impossible.
We're driving ourselves mad trying to speculate, oh, this person must be thinking this, and maybe they're thinking quite the opposite.
There was 3 different occasions where we were a hung jury. Everyone felt very strongly in their view on it and had good, substantial enough evidence to why.
The fact that there had been wrongdoing at the bank was not really in dispute. The real crux of this case was whether you could link what had happened to Mr. Wong, Mr. Tam, and Jill Sung.
Where we had the toughest time was the falsified business records, and because there was too many hands that it was touched throughout the bank for the loan approval process for things to go unnoticed. So for me, that called into a major question was there a conspiracy behind this?
There was one specific juror, not Jessica, who felt that we as a jury had a sort of broader responsibility, given the context of the financial crisis in 2008, to make an example out of this bank. That we were somehow doing a disservice to the public, to maybe the criminal justice system, by allowing them to walk free.
We sent a note on June 3rd to the judge that we were hopelessly deadlocked. 8 were on the not guilty side, 4 was on the guilty. I was one of the 4 on the guilty.
Hello? Hi, okay, so they were dismissed today, and they came back with a note, again, saying that they are deadlocked, and that both sides are adamant. And one of the jurors actually came out, and she already told us yesterday she was planning to go and see her brother in Florida, who has this really bad illness, and so the judge promised that by tomorrow night, she would be gone out of here. So the judge gave them what they call an Allen charge, which basically said, go back and try to do the best. So that means that by the end of tomorrow, either there will be a verdict or there'll be a mistrial. Tomorrow, that's it.
Tomorrow will be the last day, whether or not there's a unanimous verdict, the judge will discharge.
That's what she's not coming back. By the end of tomorrow, it's either be a mistrial or a verdict. It's over by the end of tomorrow, unless Cy Vance, in his infinite wisdom, decides to retry the case.
Jill, what are you calling home?
I'm concerned about Papa's well-being. He's 80 years old, and he's been up since 5:30 a.m. and he has nothing to eat for dinner.
Yeah,
we need to
he has
get you
to get
home.
home.
So let's get you some food. Papa, you do.
Can you hear Mom?
So we're gonna put him on a train. He will go home now, Mommy. You gotta go home, Papa. Mommy's worried. But
You better eat and then take a cab. Don't take the subway.
okay, we'll eat.
You better eat now. You're old and man, okay? You're not a young kid anymore. I see you every day for the last 5 years. The state is killing you. Killing you.
After such a long trial and so many charges against them, it's going to be very little possibility that the bank will be completely exonerated. The jury's going to find them guilty of something.
If we go down on one, it's a defeat. You know, it's got to be 80-0. You're either a felon or you're not. If you're convicted on one felony, there would be very serious ramifications for the bank.
New York Times article on Friday, June the 5th, 2015. After a 4-month trial, a jury found Abacus Federal Savings Bank and 2 of its senior officers
not guilty of grand larceny and other charges on Thursday, rejecting the Manhattan District Attorney's attempt to prove that the bank systematically lied for years to the Federal National Mortgage Association. After the court clerk read the 240 counts and repeated words "not guilty" after each one, members of the Sun family wept and embraced one another.
How do we feel?
I feel really
So many emotions.
Of course. Very happy. But I was told not to express any feelings.
No. During the trial, now you can express your feelings.
I feel very happy. I'm really looking forward to all of us being able to move on.
My father, we had to text him, and actually you got
He
called
didn't
him.
respond to the text, so then I called him. He answered the phone and just sort of took a step back and started microwaving his vegetables and said, what? There's a verdict? Oh, should I come? Like, you're not processing.
I didn't feel great about it, but I wouldn't have felt great if the verdict had been guilty. The way that the law was read to us is that under each charge, all of the different elements had to be met. In my mind, there were quite a significant few that 3 of the 4 requirements were met, but not all of them. And even though that you felt strongly that there was guilt in some aspect, you could not vote a guilty verdict. And that's where the change came for the 4 of us to move over to the not guilty side. It was doing the right thing.
By the end of it, it was difficult to believe that the prosecution had spent however many years it took to actually build the case to then, after they saw what all of their work had yielded, that they would have thought that they had enough evidence to take this case to trial and win.
Abacus was not exonerated. Was not exonerated. Exoneration is when a person is proven innocent. I don't think there's anything here that says that Abacus was proven innocent.
Poor loser comes to mind. There's a right thing to say when a prosecution office loses a case. We respect, although we disagree with the verdict, we respect the jury's verdict.
Exactly.
Period.
Of course, I'm very happy at the time. I'm very happy at the time. I feel relief because it has been a long time. And I just want to resume my normal life.
The bank's founder, Thomas Sung, 79, said, "This wrongful prosecution has exhausted a small community bank such as ours. This is a gross injustice, not only to a small bank, but is casting a shadow on our community. This is totally prejudicial and incorrect."
Okay. Not guilty 一条，那每一条有关到结头 not guilty. That's not guilty. Not guilty. The DA has totally and unequivocally lost. Now, this part is critically important. We Chinese have to learn from other minorities. When it comes to the community's interest, you must let those who are in power know that this shall never happen again.
Everybody's fair game. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? I think we need to vote, and we need to challenge people to keep them accountable.
打官司本身起码超过1000万呢。
American justice. It's become American injustice. Superimposed on you.
Yes.
Superimposed. 杠到底，That's it. 为我们出口气。哎呀。
Okay, I'm so glad you are all here in a very happy occasion. And I want to thank everybody's support and dedication. This last 5 years that we went through this unusual experience. And let's look for happier days to come. Okay.
Let us eat cake.
Let them eat cake.
This is really good though. It's green tea, black bean green tea. There's many different flavors. It's not really celebrate. I mean, we were vindicated, and that's great. But our goal was never to go through a criminal trial and be vindicated. Our goal was to serve our community, right? So this is such a waste. It's a tragedy. We have a lot of cake. We may have too much cake.
The fact that they find innocent give all of us hope that the America that we believe in, you still have a chance. But it'll cost you $10 million.
The Chinese has a saying, if you want a really hard, sharp steel, make a sword, you have to go through fire. This experience should make my daughters stronger, make them better person.
I got a text from a friend who is part of the Chinese immigrant community, and she said that she looked at the news this morning and felt proud of being a Chinese American. So that actually makes all of this worthwhile.